And this is called How to Catch Your Breath. So stop, be really still. Feel the ground cradling the bottom of your feet and trace that sensation from the very tips of your toes to the soles. Notice what it feels like being held by the earth. Describe the pressure of gravity and be comforted by the fact that there are forces greater than you to hold you down, to keep you here, to make you stay. Look around. Realize your breathing has slowed a little and that your heartbeat has steadied a bit. Take a deep breath. Pause. Release it. Take a deep breath. Pause. Release it. Realize that you had your breath all along. It's just about working with it and not against it. So that's just something to think about. I'm one of those moms that thinks everything can be cured by taking a deep breath and drinking a glass of water, but it doesn't always work, but it helps. Okay, so our topic today is compassion fatigue. And as mediators and circle keepers, we are exposed to traumatic stories on a regular basis. As volunteers, we are walking into conflict. Mediations, even as common as a small claims commercial dispute or a landlord-tenant dispute, can trigger really strong emotion in the parties. And if we've created a safe enough environment, parties aren't shy about pouring out their hearts. And also, if you're doing our job and remaining present, we as mediators often feel deep sorrow for the party's suffering. And it's a real balancing act to feel this compassion and to maintain sufficient detachment to really do our work and not come away feeling exhausted and defeated. So to help us think about these topics, I'd like to welcome Molly Rands, who is the Director of Lawyers and Judges Assistance Program from the State Bar of Michigan. So she's going to talk about helping us recognize and prevent compassion fatigue and burnout. So with that, welcome, Molly. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Gail. And let me just share my screen here, folks, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, can everyone see that okay and hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, I see nods. Good, thank you. Well, again, thank you so much to Gail. She had contacted me months ago and asked me to come and do this talk with you all today. So I'm so very grateful for that and for you all who are, taking time out of, I know, a very busy day to be here. My name is Molly Rands. I am the Director of the Lawyers and Judges Assistance Program, or LJAP, here at the State Bar of Michigan. I am not a lawyer. I'm a therapist. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm a nationally board certified counselor, and I am an internationally certified addictions clinician. And I have been working here with LJAP and specializing in the clinical care of lawyers for the last 13 years. And I've been in the director role here at LJAP since 2020. So LJAP is a confidential program. I will stress that over and over again. We are a confidential program. And we do a lot of things. We help those that are struggling with any type of mental health or substance use issue, stress, anxiety, depression, burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma. We also do a lot on the front end. We help people thrive. There does not need to be a problem to contact the Lawyers and Judges Assistance Program. So I'll try to stress that a lot today as well. But a huge part of what I do is travel around the state and the country, sometimes virtually like today, talking about any aspect of lawyer well-being. And I will say that as a therapist, this is probably my most requested and favorite topic to discuss, especially with this group, you all here today, because I think that, there are a lot of similarities between being a clinician and being an attorney. I started studying, the LSAT. I almost went to law school, and instead I ended up being a therapist specializing in lawyers, which is ironic. But I think that what you all do and what I do is similar in many ways, and in one of those ways, is really being tasked with sitting with people's pain. And that is an extremely heavy burden to bear, no matter how great you are at coping. it is not often that people call me or you on a good day, right? People don't call us to share great news about how wonderful their day is going. I rarely get a call with someone saying, Molly, hello, I just want to tell you my day is off to a fantastic start. People call us in crisis. And even though you may have seen it a million times, it could potentially be the first time and the worst day of their lives that they're experiencing what they're bringing to you. A difference is that my entire education was about what I'm going to do with that information. And up until recently, that's really been largely missing from law school. So I like to think of compassion fatigue as when caring takes a toll. And I like us all to agree to hold an assumption. I know what happens when we hold an assumption, but I'd like us all to agree to hold an assumption just for the purpose of today's conversation. And that is that compassion fatigue impacts us all to some degree or another. The very nature with which that impacts us certainly changes, and we'll talk about what that means and how that is. But I like us all to just hold on to the assumption that we're all impacted to some degree by compassion fatigue. So I also love for this to be conversational. Please do not hesitate to interrupt me, stop, unmute, throw out a comment, ask a question. If you're thinking it, it's likely that somebody else is thinking it too. All right. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? So I like to start with this slide, and I like to get you all thinking. Look at these statements, and I want you to, in your minds, fill in these blanks for me. The world is a blank place. Life is blank. Most often I feel blank. And the question I have for you is, would you fill in these blanks differently when you first entered either the practice of law or specifically the work that you're doing now? Would you answer those differently then than you do at the present moment? So for me, when I graduated, I have a graduate degree in counseling psychology. And so when I graduated, I was ready to help the world. I had a lot of energy. I still do. I was working at an organization. I was the head clinician. All of my clients were opiate dependent, primarily IV heroin users. And I had, as the head therapist, all of the really difficult cases, as if every IV heroin using case is not difficult. But I had all of our pregnant users. I had a lot of CPS involvement. I was testifying all the time. It was really stressful work. Overdoses were happening left and right. It was not uncommon for me to be calling 911, on a weekly basis. And I loved the work and I loved the job. But I noticed as I was there year after year that the way I was filling in these blanks started to change. Right? I started to become a little bit cynical. And so this is how we kind of know when compassion fatigue is impacting us. If we're filling in these blanks differently based upon experience and vicarious trauma, we need to be paying attention to that. So I just ask us to hold that in our minds, right? How would you fill in these blanks? And is that different now than when you first entered the field? So as we're holding on to this, we need to really have an understanding of what compassion fatigue is. Compassion fatigue is the cumulative physical, emotional, and psychological effect of exposure to traumatic stories or events when working in a helping capacity. The key to this definition is that it is combined with the strain and the stress of everyday life, right? In other words, the degree to which we're impacted by compassion fatigue depends upon what we bring to the table, right? We do have some control in that. Much of it we don't, right? But some of it we do. And so it is the cumulative effect of other people's trauma, other people's stories. And I love how Gail introduced this, first with the reading, but also with the discussion that you all are seeing some really heavy things day in and day out. And again, back to that assumption, this impacts us. No matter how healthy, emotionally healthy you are, no matter how great you are at coping, it would be impossible to not be impacted by other people's trauma, unless you were a robot, right? It reminds me, I have two children, they're 7 and 10, but I think back to when they were little and they would be crying and I would have somebody tell me, oh, if they're diapered and they're fed, let them cry it out. They're okay. They've got their needs met. And I remember thinking at the time, that would be the case if they were baby robots, but they're human and they need love and cuddles and kisses and care, right? So we're human. We're not robotic. We are impacted by other people's trauma. And other people's trauma is called vicarious trauma. It's not something that's happened to you directly. It's what you're hearing about, the things you're sitting with, the pictures you're seeing, the stories you're being told, right? We have this amazing thing in our brain called mirror neurons. They make us human, right? And for a split nanosecond, we don't even realize it. It's so quick. Our brains tell us that what the other person is going through has happened to us. That's what helps us develop empathy. It's fascinating. So it is possible that when we're sitting with these folks, we are empathic to them, right? You are empathic individuals. You didn't go into this field because you're, unfeeling or not caring, right? We are drawn to helping folks because we want to be in a helping profession. And so vicarious trauma is when we are sitting with other people's pain, other people's trauma, and empathizing with that. There was a really interesting study out of the Wisconsin State Public Defender Office, and it looked at the toll of trauma for folks doing the work of defenders and doing the work that you all are doing. And it found really interestingly high rates of depression, anxiety, stress amongst folks doing the work you're doing. We're going to talk a little bit soon about what those rates look like for attorneys in general. But it found depression, which is in the general population, about 10%, right? So loss of appetite, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, poor concentration, low energy, 10%, right? General population, nearly 40% of the attorneys doing the work that you're doing are indicating they're suffering from depression, significantly higher than the general population. Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? PTSD, so flashbacks, worry about things that you've heard, maybe difficulty getting those images out of your mind, right? Waking up in the night thinking about a case. General population has PTSD at about 7%. Folks doing the work you're doing, 11%, right? Nearly double that of the general population. And then, of course, what I find to be most fascinating is functional impairment. The rate to which you're impaired personally or professionally by the stories that you are hearing, by vicarious trauma, day in and day out. The attorneys doing the work that you're doing indicated that they were experiencing functional impairment. 75% of the attorneys endorse that, right? 3/4 of the lawyers doing the work that you were doing saying, this impacts me personally and professionally on a day-to-day basis. So, the question is really, what is on your plate? We know what vicarious trauma is now, right? We know that it leads to compassion fatigue, right? But we have to pay attention to the latter part of that definition, right? What I bring to the table. How this impacts me varies based upon what I bring to the table. So if I wake up on a day and I've had 8 hours of sleep and I'm, having a big glass of water and then maybe a nice strong cup of coffee, and I make it to my 6:30 a.m. hot yoga class, and so my body's feeling good, and I get home and my children listen to me, maybe magically they put on their shoes like the first or second time I ask them before we leave the house. Everybody's healthy, right? I am much better at coping with my day-to-day on those moments, on those days, than if I wake up with a poor night of sleep. Maybe my dog is sick and needs to be taken to the vet. Maybe a grandparent fell, maybe I'm stressed financially, right? Those things are going to make it so that my best that day is going to be different than my day prior. And so I caution you, when we hold ourselves to these ridiculously high standards of doing our best, right? What measuring stick are you using for that day? If you are tired and you're not able to bring what you did the day prior, your best may just have to be good enough, right? So thinking about that, what's on your plate? And I ask you all to be thinking about this as we're going through today, right? So we're thinking about how we would fill in those blanks, and we're thinking about what's on our plate, and we're thinking about what is one thing that can be reasonably removed from your plate to make your life easier. This does not have to be work related. So for example, last month, I did not sign up to be the secret reader in my children's classroom. I had some guilt about that. But there are some other wonderful mothers, fathers, step-parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, who I'm sure are amazing secret readers, right? I didn't have the bandwidth. So it's thinking about what you have the bandwidth for and what is something that can be removed from your already very overly full plate. I love this image because I truly believe that this is what my to-do list looks like. It just should be a sticky note that says everything. And if I were to magically get all of those things accomplished, I can promise you they would be full immediately again, right? Instantly. Work will always be there. It will always be there. And so what we can do is manage our own selves and what we're bringing to the table, what's on our plates. The noise and the stress of life is always going to exist and be there. The work you're all doing is very heavy, stressful work. Other people's trauma will continually be in front of you if you stay in the line of work that you're in. How come we are able to cope with that better some days than others, right? Well, it's what we're bringing to the table, but we get the opportunity to choose that response, right? Between a stimulus or a stressor and a response is space. And in that space, we have the power to take a moment and choose how we will respond. And that's kind of what Gail talked about in that reading this morning, right? Grounding yourself, feeling yourself on the earth, taking a moment to choose how you're going to respond to the stressor that exists in your day-to-day. All right, so vicarious trauma leads to compassion fatigue. And guess what? Compassion fatigue leads to burnout. I love this image of this rope. There's that straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Some days you're moving along and then all of a sudden it might seem like something small, but you just feel like you can't take it anymore, right? And this is certainly complicated by individual vulnerabilities. So how do we know if we are impacted by compassion fatigue? I want to mention that, a lot of times when people think about compassion fatigue, again, cumulative effect, right, of other people's trauma, other people's pain, cumulative effect of sitting with other people's pain, combined with what we're bringing to the table, combined with our own stressors, combined with our own difficulties, right? If you tend to be somebody who is a worrier, we all know somebody who's a worrier, that person may be more apt to be stressed out when compassion fatigue rolls around. If you know somebody who tends to be down, right, that they may be more impacted by compassion fatigue. So how do we know? How do we know if we are impacted by compassion fatigue? So a lot of people talk about compassion fatigue as being too compassionate, caring too much about others. And I even mentioned when we first started that compassion fatigue is often when caring takes a toll. But I don't think that compassion fatigue, I've been doing this for a decade and a half, I don't think that compassion fatigue is caring too much for others. I mean, I think that's authentically who we are, right? We are caring people. This is why we're in the field that we're in. Being authentically ourselves is not fatiguing us. It's when that is not flowing both ways. When we are caring so much for others that we're not spending any energy caring for ourselves. So compassion fatigue is really a lack of self-compassion, right? A lack of giving ourselves grace. How do we know when that's impacting us? Well, there are physical symptoms. We might feel sick. I mean, we all know the person who, when they get really stressed out, they get sick, right? Their bodies can't fight off things and they don't feel well. There's a really good book. It's called When the Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about how when emotionally we're not aware that we're being impacted by the daily stressors, our bodies will tell us for us, right? It's time to take a break. It's time to take a moment. All of a sudden we come down with bronchitis or we sprain an ankle and we are literally unable to keep going. We might have headaches. I know whenever I have a really stressful event, mine is not necessarily a headache, but a tension neck ache. And it's interestingly after the event, like I get through the difficult event and then I'll be driving home maybe from a speaking engagement or something stressful and I can feel it coming up my neck at that time. Tightness in chest, temperature changes. Maybe you sweat a lot, right? You notice when you leave a stressful mediation that your body temperature is shot way up. Dizziness, somebody's talking to you but you're not hearing what they're saying. And then of course the psychological symptoms, right? Anger, or irritability. Sometimes I don't even know something's bothering me until one of my kiddos says, Mommy, you're crabby. I'm like, okay, you're right. What's going on? What is bugging me? What impacted me today? That anxiety, that worry, mild levels of anxiety and stress, folks, are not bad things, right? You all are, I am grateful to be sitting in a virtual room with extremely high achievers. You would not be here if you were not extremely high achievers and very successful at what you do. And I guarantee you didn't get there by not having stress or anxiety, right? I do this presentation a lot. I always get anxious beforehand. It helps me go over my slides and my notes and know what I'm talking about and who I'm talking to, so that I get invited back and you don't, exit me out before I'm even done. It helps us be motivated. The problem is when it becomes moderate to chronic, right? If I am done with this and I'm driving home today and I'm still noticing my shoulders up tight and I'm still worried, something's wrong, right? Because the stressor is behind me. The feeling of helplessness, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, feeling just overwhelmed, feeling numb, and dissociating. Sometimes we are kind of just catch ourselves staring off to a wall and we snap back, we realize 5 minutes have passed by, right? So here are some indicators that we are exhausted from other people's trauma, that is impacting us, and we are experiencing compassion fatigue. It is an indicator that we're not taking good enough care of ourselves because all of our energies are devoted to taking care of others, and that we are moving toward burnout. And so I'm hopeful that we can walk away today feeling a little bit more renewed and rejuvenated and able to recognize when we're getting to that space. Because I think attorneys are amazing at recognizing what their clients need. Sometimes that doesn't leave a lot of room for recognizing what you need. So what do you need? What do we know about attorneys in general? Many of you may know about this information, but I still think it's really important to talk about. There was a study done in 2017, and it is now very famously referred to as the lawyer study. This study surveyed over 13,000 lawyers, practicing lawyers across the country. And it was the first study we had since 1990 on lawyer well-being. And it found what those of us in the LAP world, or the Lawyers Assistance Program world, what we knew because we were in the trenches, right, taking these calls every single day. But folks, it found statistically and significantly elevated rates of substance use and mental health issues amongst legal professionals. And these rates are much higher than the general population, and they are much higher than other high stress professions, right? You are far surpassing the doctors and the surgeons and even the dentists with regard to your rates of depression, anxiety, stress, and substance use. Nearly 30% of the 13,000 lawyers indicated they were struggling with severe depression at the time of the survey. Nearly 20% said the same about anxiety. And it wasn't just at the time of the survey. We asked the lawyers, okay, well, what about in your career, right? 61% said that at some point in their career, right, because of the practice of law, their anxiety levels were so high that they were impacting them at work. And nearly half said the same about depression. The suicide rate for attorneys, folks, is 6 times that of the general population. 6 times. Just by being a lawyer, you have a 6 times rate chance of completing suicide than the average Joe. Think about that, right? Something is happening in the field of law. And we've found the same studies out of law schools, right? Higher rates than the general population, much higher rates than other high stress grad programs. And a lot of times my students will say to me, well, Molly, maybe stressed out, anxious and depressed people are just drawn to the field of law. Valid hypothesis, but we've researched it and it's not the case. There was a study out of Harvard, I think it was 2017, 886 law students, 70%, nearly 68%, I think, of the students indicated that their difficulties were brand new to 1L. Brand new to 1L. So the field of law, right, is resulting in these. And that's why lawyers assistance programs exist, because we understand the unique needs that you guys are presenting with. Interestingly enough, in 1990, we had very similar information. And at that time, we thought that the longer one practiced law, the greater the difficulties became. And we now know that the highest risk population are those lawyers under the age of 30 or within the first 10 years of practice. We have a question in the chat. Do we tell law students this so they can be mindful? Absolutely, Phil. Thank you for asking that question. We do tell students that. And you know, it's funny because when I first started at the bar a decade and a half ago, I would call the law schools and say, you know, my name is Molly, I'm a clinician, I specialize in legal professionals. Can I come out and tell your students about law student well-being? And I would have professors say to me in Michigan at our schools, you know what, Molly, thank you so much for contacting us. We actually don't have any of those problems here. Our students are great. And so I would just keep calling and keep trying. And now they're like beating down the door. Will you please come? Will you please speak to our students? Because we have this research now. It's in black and white. We cannot ignore it. And professors understand the importance of it. So, yep, we're in the schools, and I will talk to one person or 1,000. If I am invited, I will show up. I will come, and I will talk about this. Okay. So we now know what vicarious trauma is, right? We know it's other people's trauma, it's other people's stories, it's other people's pain. We know that the cumulative effect of that, combined with our own stress, results in compassion fatigue. We know that compassion fatigue leads to burnout, right? But we also want to, and yeah, someone mentioned that only a handful are attorneys, and that's why I kind of talk about, I heard some clinicians and some folks doing case management and work, and that is very similar to the type of work that I'm doing. So this is applicable to all of us, right? But I know there's no CLE in Michigan, which I, you know, would love to change. But as a clinician and somebody who has a lot of different certifications and licensures and letters after my name, I have to do a lot of continuing education. The minimum I can do is 40 every 2 years, which is a lot. And so I find that one of my biggest pet peeves is when I go to a training or a conference or a seminar and we spend all this time talking about the problem, which a lot of times we know what the problem is, right? And no time talking about the solution. So I want to spend the next half of the time that we're talking about today on talking about the solution. And you know, you are the experts on your lives. You know what works for you and what doesn't. So please feel free to jump in at any time. But I'd like to provide this information in a really easy way to remember, right? Because in moments of high stress, our brains are not designed to process complex information. So complex solutions are not going to be helpful for us in those moments of high stress, right? So I like to teach the ABCs. A is for awareness, B is for balance, and C is for connection. And there's a lot of research behind the ABCs. And so if there's one thing you can remember today, it's awareness, balance, and connection. I can promise you, you will feel more resilient, right? What is resiliency, right? The ability to bounce back after stress. Resilient people don't have less stress than non-resilient people. They just deal with it better, right? So if we're implementing self-awareness and we're creating better balance in our lives and we're making better connections with others, we are more resilient, better capable of dealing with stress, and we're more optimistic. Very important for lawyers. I am so impressed by your ability, lawyers' abilities, and the ability of clinicians and those working with the populations we're working with to look at a situation and find everything that could potentially go wrong, right? That makes us good at our jobs. The problem is if we don't switch that, flip that switch, if I were to walk in the door at night and look at my husband and think about all of the things that could potentially go wrong in my marriage, I probably wouldn't still be married, right? How do we switch that? How do we flip that switch? How do we flip from pessimism to optimism? Awareness, balance, and connection. I am so fascinated by our bodies and our brains. So if we think about many, many years ago, what happens when somebody is running from a bear in the woods? Let's think about that, right? Basic human fight or flight. So we have what's called an autonomic nervous system, right? It's made up of our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems. It's an amazing thing. It tells us to swallow and breathe and blink. right? So that I don't have to remind myself to do that while I'm simultaneously talking to you all. What it also does is it tells us when we're in danger, and it has the ability to calm us back down. So what happens when we're running from a bear in the woods? What does our parasympathetic nervous system do automatically? Well, first of all, it floods our body with cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone, right? Cortisol stresses out our body to tell us we're in danger, okay? Our brains then tell the rest of our body, hey, any system that's not immediately needed right now can slow to a grinding halt. So for example, our digestive system essentially stops, right? It's why if you're super stressed out, you're not hungry. Your brain is telling your body, you don't need to eat right now. You need to survive from this bear, right? Run faster. Amazingly, our hearts actually generate thicker blood and pumps it to our extremities to literally fight or flight. The problem, folks, is that our systems are not designed to have high levels of cortisol chronically running through it. They're not designed to continually pump that thick of blood to our extremities, right? Which is why people with a lot of stress have such high rates of cardiac arrest. They have heart attacks. I mean, it's actual science, right? But what this also means is that humans, amazingly, have the ability, which I find fascinating, to slow our own heart rate and calm ourselves down. So we can do that through breath, right? Gail mentioned she is the mother who thinks everything is solved by a deep breath and a glass of water. There's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that, right? So I usually teach people box breathing. If you are in the military or are a veteran or have had any experience with police academy, you know about box breathing. Box breathing is very helpful, and I can walk us through that in just a moment, because when we're running from a bear in the woods and we're trying to get safe, right, we're using all of these systems, right? We're grinding to a halt, we're fighting or flighting, we've got stress cortisol rushing through us. We've done all these studies on the brain and what happens in those situations. Fast forward to 2024, guess what? Our brains and our bodies don't know the difference between a bear in the woods and a nasty email. Same response. So now, instead of once every 6 months when we're running from a bear, we have maybe 6 times a morning a response like this. Now, I don't know about you all, but I don't have 20 minutes to sit and reset every time I get a disgruntled email or an email I feel stressed about that I have to take care of. We don't have that kind of time in 2024, right? And research tells us that our brains need 20 minutes to reset after a significantly stressful situation. My guess is that you all don't have that kind of time. I know I don't, right? So a box breath literally slows our heart rate down, which gets our systems back to equilibrium. I use the number 4 because there are 4 sides to a box and it's easy to remember. A box breath is when we breathe in for 4, we hold for 4, we exhale for 4, we hold for 4. It takes 16 seconds. I'm going to walk us through that right now. Okay? So if everybody could get into a comfortable space, we're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. In just 16 seconds, we have just slowed down our own heart rate. And you will find when you're in a mediation or you're in court or you're doing any stressful type of work, if you are starting to sweat and you're noticing your heart is beating fast, right? I want you to pay attention to your breath, because science tells us the average number of breaths that we are supposed to take in 1 minute. Does anybody have a guess as to what that is? 6. Yeah, I see the wows. 6 breaths in 1 minute. So if we think about that, right, because when I first learned this, when I was doing all this breath work, I would guess like 20, I wasn't sure. But so you'll notice you'll notice when you're stressed, that fast-paced breathing, if you can get shift back, if you can do that box breath and shift back, you are slowing down that response of fight, flight, or freeze. So you guys, we have the power, we have the control to do that. And I think that's really fascinating. And so I like to teach that. So A for awareness, certainly awareness of breath, B for balance, and C for connection. So let's first talk about awareness. So as I mentioned before, you all have an amazing ability to have an awareness of what your clients need. I am always floored by this ability. And so I really have this homework assignment for you that, try to start doing a daily check-in for self-awareness, right? I like to do this at night. Maybe you want to do it in the morning or midway through the day. But what are you feeling? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you frustrated? What's going on? And this is hard. Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it takes a minute to figure that out, right? But we don't know what we need until we know how we're feeling. So after a lot of work on my end on this, I know that I max out every day around 1, 2 o'clock. I can't move forward another inch. And it makes sense. I start work very, very early. I get up at 5:30 in the morning and I do hot yoga, and then I work for a couple of hours because I've got 2 small children. And so I need to get some work in before they get up for the day, and I have to do breakfast and lunches and snacks and school carting. But I know that at 1, 2 o'clock, I'm done. I know that if I were to stay and finish up all those things that I need to do, it's not going to be my best work, right? Those things will always be there. Now, I understand I have some flexibility with that here, but I know, and I come back to the work after I take a moment, but I know that I am maxed out and burnt out every day around 1, 2 o'clock. And so every day for the past 10 years, whether it be snowing, sunny, raining, I take a walk. I try to do a minimum of a 2-mile walk every day around 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's what I need to reset. So that may not be for you. You may not enjoy walking. You may not have the flexibility to do that. But what is it that you need, right? How can we clue into what our emotions are so we know what we need? Are you thirsty? Do you need a drink? Are you hungry? Do you need a snack? Do you need a walk? Do you need a break? Do you need a nap, right? What is it that you need? And we don't know what we need until we know how we feel. So I really encourage that daily check-in of what am I feeling? And it's okay if it doesn't come to you right away, or if it takes a couple of weeks to start to kind of figure that out. But once we know those things, we know what limits and boundaries we need to set. And I have a whole separate slide on limits and boundaries because I think this is so very important, an awareness of what our limits and our boundaries are. It's interesting, there's been all this research on the best limit and boundary setters. And we find them to be Mother Teresa and Gandhi and all of these folks who are giving and kind and caring. And, a lot of times people are shocked by this information. I think there is an assumption that if we are kind and compassionate, empathic and caring, we never say no. And that is not the case, right? I am a people pleaser and I'm a yes person. So I know for me personally that I will always say yes. And so I have to institute limits and boundaries to protect myself from that. It took me years to recognize that. Now, no matter what the request is, whether it be to drive to soccer practice or to do a presentation or to take on a new client, I always say the same thing. That sounds great. Let me check my calendar and get back with you. It doesn't matter if I'm 100% sure I will do it or if I'm not sure at all. It gives me space, right? Remember, between the stimulus and the response is space. It gives me space to think about my decision. So when Gail reached out, I probably said the same thing to her or said, let me get back with you, or, right? It's something I've instituted to help protect me. So I'd like us to consider setting limits and boundaries. We can certainly do that with regard to screen time. I know the irony of that is I'm talking to you through a screen, but I think that the pandemic and the access to that clients have to us now is insurmountable. It's constant. I'm getting messages all the time on Teams. I have lawyers call me every day and say, Molly, it's like my clients have become so much more demanding, and I don't know why. I think that they have access to us a lot easier now. What limits and boundaries can you set with those folks? if you think about it, limits and boundaries are good for everybody. So if you have a client call you at 6 p.m. on a Friday night and you answer and you meet their need and you hang up, you go about your weekend. Well, maybe the next Friday night they call you again. Now it's 6:30 p.m. on a Friday night, right? Now the third Friday night, they call you again. You're frustrated because you're just trying to enjoy a night with your family. They're panic stricken because you're not answering and you answered the prior 2 Fridays, right? Nobody is benefiting from the inability to set the limit or the boundary. If you tell your clients from the get-go, I return calls Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, they know what to expect and you know what to expect. Nobody's panicking when they can't reach you at 6 p.m. because they know you don't answer the phone at 6 p.m., right? Setting limits and boundaries is good for everyone, right? And all we really need is an awareness of what that looks like. So this is different for everybody. It may be not taking your phone with you on a walk. It might be setting a do not disturb at the dinner table. I had a client who started plugging her phone in across the room when she went to bed at night. And she's like, Molly, it saved me hours of scrolling and getting into these political fights on Facebook that I never win anyway. You know, what limits and boundaries do we need to set for ourselves? They can be so minor, folks. Even saving minutes a week, those minutes add up to hours and those hours add up to days over the course of a year. I don't know about you, but research shows us we have more than 120 emails coming in on average per day. I think this is probably true for me. I bet you 20% of them have a red exclamation that means read yesterday, which I don't have the ability to do. I remember the first time I became aware of how many hours I spent scrolling on my smartphone. It showed me, my iPhone showed me years ago on a Sunday, just the awareness of that. I have never gotten back to that number. I was floored, right? So awareness is half the battle. And a lot of times people come to therapy and they want the fix. It's like, well, first we need to have an awareness of what's going on, right? So let's start doing that daily check-in. What am I feeling? And if I know what I'm feeling now, I might know what I need. And if I know what I need to set some limits and boundaries. And what are those and what does that look like, right? I can't tell you how many times I email a lawyer or somebody in the work that, anyone, and I get an auto response that says, I'm out on vacation. If you need me, here's my cell. That's not a vacation, right? So how do we direct them to someone else? I remember reading about a really interesting study that it probably would never work in the US, and somebody in a managerial position on this call is probably going to be very upset with me for even sharing it, but it was out of Europe, and the company, huge company, when someone took a vacation, if somebody contacted them via email, the auto response was, this person is out of the office, this email is being deleted, please try to contact them again on this date. And wouldn't that be so wonderful? Because how do we all feel when we come back from a vacation, right? We feel like, oh, we shouldn't have taken that vacation. I have to dig out of 600 emails, right? But we're always going to be digging out. And so we still have to take the time off because the work will never end, right? So let's try to institute some self-awareness. All right, so A is for awareness, B is for balance. Now, this is a great slide, and you all, Gail is welcome to distribute these slides. You can look at this, you can make it bigger. I know this print, at least for me, I have to kind of lean in to see. This is also available on the ABA website. This image was created by Ann Bradford. Ann is a former Big Law equity partner. She burned out from the practice of law and went back to school to get her degree in positive psychology. And we now know, folks, that well-being is not just the absence of illness, right? If I say, hey, Al, how are you doing today? And you say, I'm doing well. What does that mean, right? You got up, you got dressed, you got to work. Those are great things to be able to do, folks, but well-being is thriving. And that's why I mentioned that there does not need to be a problem to contact LJAP. People sometimes call and say, things are okay. I just, something's not right. So when people, and I will tell you the biggest question I get day in and day out is, Molly, how do I create better work-life balance? Right? I hear that all the time. And so I direct people to this image and I say, well, let's take a look at our dimensions of well-being, right? There are 6. There's emotional well-being, right? The ability to identify and manage our emotions, occupational well-being, right? Satisfaction at work, intellectual well-being, right? Our crossword puzzles, our Sudokus, spiritual well-being, physical well-being, and social well-being. And so I say to folks, let's do a test. Let's see where we are in these dimensions. Let's see what balance is in our lives. Maybe socially things are great. You're in a book club, you're in a bowling league, you're getting together with colleagues, right, to stop difficult cases. You have a good support system. But maybe physically, things aren't so great. You live on coffee and 5 hours of sleep at night. You don't drink water and you don't eat things that are green, and you maybe haven't seen a physician since you aged out of the pediatrician's office, right? So that is a way for us to get a sense of what is missing for us and how we create that balance a bit better. And a lot of times we hear, oh, balance, do yoga, meditate, take a walk in nature. Those are great things to be able to do, right? But sometimes it's not enough, and that's okay. And I'm grateful that the pandemic really, shone a light on well-being, and you can't turn on the TV without hearing about meditation and yoga and mindfulness, and those are great things. But if you're still struggling, it's not because you're not doing well-being well enough. It's because sometimes we need help and we need support from other people who specialize in this stuff, right? So this is a good way to check your balance. And then finally, C is for connection. This is so important. There's so much research behind connection, and I think that's really one of the reasons the pandemic was so very hard, that isolation. But connecting with yourself, connecting with nature, connecting with others around you. Research tells us that the best way to bounce back or be resilient after a really difficult case is just by talking to others, debriefing. And there doesn't need to be an answer. Somebody doesn't need to be able to say, oh, yes, well, you could do this or you should do this. Just simply I've been there. Had a really hard case last week. Something similar was really hard for me. Looking at those pictures of that abuse case was really hard for me. Hearing that story was really challenging for me. That connection helps us to walk away feeling more positive and more resilient and more optimistic. Something larger than ourselves. It can be spiritual. It can be religious. It doesn't have to be, right? How can we create connection? You're doing that just by being on this call, just by showing up here today. So A for awareness, B for balance, C for connection. I remember I was at a conference once and they asked me to close my eyes and to think about a time I felt connected to others. And I remember closing my eyes and I thought about, Gail and I were just talking before this about how much we love to travel. And I had thought about the last time I traveled with my family, and we were on a beach and we were watching the sunset, and I felt so connected to these human beings that were part of my unit, and I was smiling and I felt warm, and they brought us back and they asked us to close our eyes and think about a time we felt disconnected, alone. Folks, I don't even remember what I thought about, but I remember how I felt. I felt scared and stressed and overwhelmed. And I walked away from that thinking, if the image alone of connection and disconnection is so powerful, what is actual connection and disconnection, right? So A for awareness, B for balance, C for connection. And we connect in healthy workplaces. So to the extent that you have, the ability, and I stress this because we all don't have the ability, right? Sometimes, you may be sitting here thinking, yeah, some solutions are for a perfect world. I don't have the ability to manage my caseload. I don't have the ability to manage, how many folks I'm seeing or what they're coming in for. And I understand that. This is not solely on you. And I want to stress that over and over and over again. This is not solely on you. The statistics we're seeing with law schools, with law students, with lawyers, they're not because of something you've done. This is a structural issue. Right? And we are doing things on a structural end to change the culture of the field of law. I've been working with Justice Kavanaugh at the Michigan Supreme Court for the last 2 years on a task force on well-being. We submitted a final report to the court in August. The court ordered a commission on well-being in September, and we have our first all-out commission meeting in March at the Hall of Justice next Monday. I encourage you to check out the final report because we made 21 recommendations to shift the culture of the legal profession to make it healthier emotionally in Michigan. And I'm so excited for what is to come. So I promise you, right, this is not all on you. This does not all fall on your shoulders, right? But some of the things we're talking about today are, what can I do individually while these other structural things are happening? How do I take care of myself? Because compassion fatigue, again, is not being too compassionate. It's being compassionate toward others while not being compassionate to ourselves. So healthy workplaces have a say, right? They can provide respite for staff if there's a traumatic event, or put grief processes in place when traumatic events occur. I was brought out to a firm last week or the week before. A colleague died unexpectedly, and it caused a ripple and a wave through that firm, through that organization. People didn't know how to deal with it. Do they ignore it? Do they talk about it? Everybody deals with things differently, right? I mean, we don't cope the same way. And so I was called out, and I gave a short presentation on grief and loss. And then I set up space in a room on the side, and people could stop in if they wanted to talk. Healthy workplaces provides, continuing education like this today for staff, right? To the extent they have the ability, they provide, benefits and aid to staff and provide them tools to accomplish the tasks that they need to do. To the extent they have the ability, they try to monitor workloads, team building activities, and certainly encourage that open communication. And as I mentioned, help is available. LJAP is such a wonderful resource to you all. We are truly a confidential program that exists with a team of clinicians here specifically designed to specialize in you and in the unique things that you're bringing to the table. It's very different than flipping over your insurance card and picking somebody and calling them up. That might be great and helpful, but as you know, and as I know, the roles that you're in as mediators, as lawyers, as social workers, those are unique roles, and you have unique needs. This is a safety sensitive profession. It's identified and spelled out in many different texts, right? Along with therapists and physicians and airline pilots and police officers, the work you do is safety sensitive. It is different. It is unique. If it weren't, we wouldn't have the statistics that we have. So help is available here with the Lawyers and Judges Assistance Program. I am a clinician. I have 2 excellent clinicians on staff, and we offer so many wonderful services, and most of them are free. I tell people, call us. You don't have to give me your name. Just call us up and ask a question. One of the services that we provide is a virtual support group. This is free. It is free to all members of the State Bar of Michigan. We started this virtual support group in 2021 when we recognized that people were feeling really isolated and that this pandemic wasn't ending. And we planned to run it for 8 weeks. And here we are 3 years later, and it is so well attended. It has been such a benefit. We have so many repeat folks who come back week after week. It's on Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock. It's free. You just Zoom in and you talk about the stressors of the practice of law. What is working for you? What's not working for you? You get support from your peers. Remember that connection? See, connection? This is a chance to do that. It is not treatment, right? It's just support. It's facilitated by one of our clinicians on staff. He keeps it going and moving, but it's something to check out. We offer the Solace program. The Solace program is a program designed for those not with a mental health or substance use issue, right? LJAP does that as well. But Solace is designed for those who have had some type of a sudden illness or a catastrophic event in their lives that they need help with. We just had a lawyer, and it's offered for anybody in the legal profession or anybody working in a legal organization and their friends and family, right? It's not just attorneys, it's not just judges, it's not just students, anybody connected to the legal field. But we just had an attorney write in. His wife was diagnosed with a really unique type of cancer. They had insurance, they had resources, but they didn't know anything about it. Where do they go? We put the request out to our network, and within minutes, we had somebody write in who knew a specialist at U of M, and they had an appointment on Monday. So check this out. If you or someone you know has had some type of catastrophic event happen, this program is really great for you all as well. So here are the names of our staff members, right? Myself, our 2 clinicians, and our program coordinator. We do so many things with LJAP. We are so happy to talk with you at any time. You can reach us on a helpline, you can email us, you can check out our website, you can call us directly. And I want to give one more plug for the next event that we have going on, which is also for free. So on Friday, April 26th, One of the things LJAP has been trying to do is at least twice a year, bring in pretty famous keynote speakers from around the country to talk about some aspect of lawyer well-being, right? Because it's essential to competency. And so on April 26th, we have the amazing Jordana Confino coming in virtually, and she's going to talk about foundations for flourishing, how to make your practice better, how to take better care of yourselves, how well-being is really essential to competency, how when we're well, we are better lawyers, better social workers, better humans, right? Versus the opposite, being a good lawyer, social worker, human helps us be well, right? Well-being is really essential to that component. How do we flourish in our practice? The first 25 people who register will get a free follow-up session, coaching session with Jordana, which is amazing. They're expensive. She's very sought after. So you can register for that on the State Bar website. If you go to the LJAP website, I think it's on a banner running across the top as well. If you want the information because you can't find it, please let me know, and I'm happy to share that. I can send it to Gail afterward as well. But Friday, the 26th, 10 a.m., a free event with Jordana Confino. And so with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you have. I'll check the chat here as well. Gail has put some things in the chat. There were a couple questions that I have already answered. So I'm happy to take questions now, or if you don't feel comfortable asking them, which is often the case, please feel free to follow up with me in an email or a phone call in the minutes, hours, or days or weeks that follow this event as well.
The document that I put in the chat was just Molly's presentation. I know I shared it with the folks on my mailing list, but I know that a lot of folks here today are not, I don't have your email. So if you want a copy of the presentation so you can get to those resources, there it is. Anybody have any questions or situations for Molly, like things that you might have experienced? Do you want to pick her brain for ways to deal with it or anything like that? Well, Molly, thank you so much, Molly, for sharing your time and for sharing all those resources. It's really, really very helpful for me. I love box breathing. I'm a big box breather. So yeah, you got a lot of nice thank you there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And again, if there's ever anything that I can do or LJAP can do on any topic or on any situation, please don't hesitate to call us. And if we don't have the answer or the resource, we promise to get you to a place that does.
Thank you so much. So just a couple reminders here, and if you all have anything else that you want to talk about what's going on at the DRC or anything, we can use a few minutes to chat about that. Just a reminder, our Unity Walk is scheduled for June 8th this year, so be sure to mark that on your calendar. We do have 2 more sessions, lunch and learn sessions scheduled this year. Our next one will be on April 3rd, and that will be on de-escalation processes that we can use during mediation and circle sessions. And then our last one for the year, which will be on May 1st, is civil rights mediations. And this should be interesting because we are entering into a new program with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, where they will be sending some of their cases to some of the local mediation centers, and the DRC is going to be one of those centers. So we'll be receiving a different kind of case than we have received in the past. So someone from the Department of Civil Rights will talk about the status of the program, when we'll start receiving cases, and some unique aspects of those cases, some considerations we should have in mediations. Anybody have any questions about anything or anything you want to share, anything for the good of the group? Belinda?
Go ahead, Belinda.
I was just going to add, well,
First, hi everyone, and I'm sorry that I joined the presentation late. Got tied up in a court case, so couldn't abandon that. I just wanted to add on that the Civil Rights Department is hoping and planning to begin the referral process on April 1st. So it's coming soon. And this is aligned with our civil mediators. So if you've had that training, you're certainly able to mediate those cases. More information to come as things are kind of morphing. The infrastructure of this and the framework within the centers is kind of evolving as we speak. So not a lot that I can share right now, but I do know a date that that the department aspires to is April 1st. So I just wanted to share that.
Phil, did you have a comment or a question?
Only to mention, Gail, that the Diversity and Inclusion Action Team of the ADR section of the State Bar has revived its discussion with the federal district bench on the 1983 mediations for incarcerated folks who are incarcerated in the state of Michigan. At one point, and maybe Belinda can help me, I think they insisted that the mediators who participated in that program be attorneys. I don't know if that's still so. Belinda, can you help me with that? But the point is that
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, there are folks who are incarcerated who still wish to use the service and engage mediators to assist them in negotiations with the Attorney General, and the Federal District Bar is very interested in expanding that pool of folks. So there's a big opportunity, I think, for people who are interested in doing that kind of work. It's a challenge. I think it kind of goes hand in hand. I'm really excited to hear about the civil rights cases that y'all are going to be participating in. That should be really interesting and you know, a change of pace for sure. So that's exciting. Thank you.
Let's see, Molly, what did you
Really looking for anybody. I'm always looking for feedback. So if it was helpful, please feel free to fill out the survey, or if it wasn't, that helps me to do better next time. So thank you.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? All righty. Well, I think we'll end it a little bit early today, and thank you all so much for coming. It was nice to see the new faces here today, and hopefully we'll see you next month when we talk about de-escalation, and then in May when we talk a little more about the civil rights program. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Molly, for being here, and everyone stay healthy and take care. Breathe, drink water.